My aunt loved us dearly. We were always happy at her mother's house. Early in the morning, we got ready and reached our grandmother's house. By evening, when the house was full of guests, my mother began feeling uneasy and suddenly fainted. The commotion caused the ceremony to stop. My mother was quickly rushed to the hospital, and my aunt's engagement ceremony was postponed. My mother stayed in the hospital for 6 days as tests were conducted. It was then revealed that she had blood cancer and only a few days of life left. This news was nothing short of devastation for my grandparents. My aunt, who loved my mother deeply, was inconsolable. The bond between the two sisters was exemplary. In her final moments, my mother held her younger sister's hand and said, "My sister, promise me that you will take care of my daughters after I'm gone. No one can give them a mother's love like you can." We 4 sisters were left alone in the house, with no one to take care of us. It was a difficult time. One day, our grandfather, grandmother, and father sat down with their heads in their hands, wondering what to do with us. Should we stay with our grandparents or with our father? Our grandmother, Rashida, couldn't take care of us due to her age, and our stepmother was strict and selfish. Our stepmother bluntly said that there was no room in the house for 4 more children. "We have our own children. I can't disturb my peace. If they can't live alone, their father should remarry to bring in a new mother for the girls so they can have a home." But the question remained: who would marry a father of 4 daughters? And who could guarantee that every woman would prove to be a good mother, especially a stepmother? Such a bond is only found in dreams. Eventually, our stepmother suggested that since our aunt loved us so much, and we were already close to her, why not have our father marry his sister-in-law? This would solve the problem within the family. God knows how much my aunt loved her fiancé, but she now stood at a crossroads, her future on one side, and her love for her nieces on the other. My 2 younger sisters used to sleep in her arms. Meanwhile, our grandmother looked at her with tearful eyes, saying, "Daughter, how can you leave these innocent children? Their silent eyes and tears need you. No one but you can take care of them. Don't leave them helpless." My aunt was emotionally blackmailed, and our grandparents made the decision. The man she once called brother-in-law and brother was now her husband. Only she and God know how she truly felt about this. We, on the other hand, were happy that our aunt had become a bride and would now stay with us forever. My father was significantly older than my aunt, but over time, she accepted him as her life partner. At that time, my eldest sister was 10 years old. I was 8, the younger one was 6, and the youngest was just 3 years old. Losing our mother left us shattered, but our aunt took her place. She had always loved us, but now she cared for us even more. In her laughter, we searched for a mother's love. Whenever she remembered the promise she had made to her elder sister, tears flowed from her eyes. It's true. A house doesn't survive because of children. It survives because of a woman. In the beginning, even our father showered us with love, caring for both us and our aunt, recognizing the sacrifice she had made for us. But this harmony lasted only until my aunt had her own children. When her own children were born, the attention shifted away from us. No matter how much love one has for a sister's children, it pales in comparison to one's own. Our lives were once again overshadowed by darkness. Gradually, she started pushing us away. She would get angry with us and scold us even over minor mistakes. If anyone reminded her that we were the children of her late sister, urging her to treat us better, she would smile and assure them. But behind closed doors, she would take it out on us. We, who had found comfort in her arms after losing our mother, began to wither away. Her changing behavior left us feeling abandoned, and the sorrow of being orphans began to show on our faces. When our father finally realized that she was mistreating us, he grew distressed and often lashed out in frustration. This only worsened things, as she began to see us as her enemies. Though she wouldn't openly express hatred, her actions showed otherwise. If she needed us to do something, her tone would soften. But the moment she was angry, she'd start complaining to our father about every little issue, even things long forgotten. Our childhood was riddled with confusion, as we couldn't fully understand her actions back then. Slowly, we learned to adapt. My elder sister, being bold and honest, would sometimes speak up in front of her. This only made her a target for our aunt's anger. I, on the other hand, remained quiet, swallowing my feelings to shield my younger siblings from our stepmother's wrath. My elder sister became the focus of her resentment. Our aunt decided that the only solution was to marry her off as quickly as possible. She began pressuring our father, saying, "You have 4 daughters. It will take a lifetime to get them all married. My own children are young, and by the time they're ready, you'll be old. You should think practically and start with your eldest daughter." Our father, hesitant, replied, "She's barely 14 and hasn't even finished her exams yet. Let her complete her education first." But our aunt insisted. "I never said to send her off immediately. Of course, only if a good proposal comes along. In fact, I already have someone in mind, Sabahat's son. He's a good boy, from a well-off family, and we wouldn't even need to do much investigating since they're relatives. Isn't that a blessing?" My father hesitated, pointing out, "But he isn't well educated." She countered, "So what? He has his own business, and the family is well off. Isn't that enough? Your wife is gone, and you managed to remarry. The boy doesn't have any children from his previous marriage either." Reluctantly, my father said, "All right, I'll think about it, but let her finish her exams first." Time passed, and the proposal gained momentum. Our aunt started arranging meetings between the families. One day, the boy came to visit with his father and another relative. My father wasn't home at the time, and they sat in the drawing room discussing the proposal. Meanwhile, I went to the kitchen and then headed to wash my hands, unaware that someone was already in the washroom. I quickly turned back upon realizing this, but our aunt saw me retreating from the washroom door. That was all it took for her to create an issue. She scolded my sister harshly, saying, "How could you not know there were guests in the house? Why would you go to the outside washroom?" My sister's only fault was being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it was enough for our aunt to make her life more difficult. She didn't go to the bathroom attached to the room. Don't you have even that much decency to know that one shouldn't use bathrooms designated for guests when guests are present? She, longing for affection, broke into tears at this harsh scolding. She felt like a criminal in her own home, scared, shattered, and burdened with guilt, as if she had committed some grave sin. On top of it, she was constantly reminded, "Eat less, wake up earlier. You've become so out of control physically." I tried to explain to them that she's changing, but she's still just a person. Mothers scold their children too, don't they? So why such resentment over their scolding? I would try to reason with them, telling them that young children tire one out, and that's why their frustration comes out on us. I would also try to console my sister, but at the same time, I reflected on these things myself. I often thought, if only her marriage had been arranged sooner, these problems wouldn't exist. Stepmothers do have a way of leaving deep marks on one's heart. The incident deeply affected my sister. She stopped eating and grew weaker by the day. She became so frail that she would feel dizzy just getting up. Even the sight or smell of food made her nauseous. All this was due to the pressure inflicted on her by our aunt. Yet instead of taking her to a doctor for treatment, our aunt only escalated her harshness and insults. She began saying things like, "She's becoming useless and lazy day by day. She lies in bed all day. If you ask her to do anything, she claims she feels dizzy. She'll have to go to someone else's house one day. How will she manage there?" The pressure on my innocent sister increased to the point where one day, while she was having breakfast, our aunt barged into the kitchen. She sneered, "Eat sparingly. Your marriage is approaching. Don't end up looking like a fat buffalo as a bride. Fat girls don't make good brides." She had already shown signs of stress. Her complexion had changed since coming to the city, turning pale. She collapsed into bed. Her condition was the result of nerves affected by the constant criticism over food, but our aunt twisted the situation, suggesting even worse things. She said, "Give her poison. Her state has become such that our family is now close to disgrace." Our tears flowed like blood because of the cruelty inflicted upon her. One day we came home from school, and my sister showed us her bruises and exhaustion. Our aunt, despite her fault, asked bizarre questions about why she had gone to the guest bathroom that day. My sister would get so angry at our aunt's senseless remarks that she would scream and curse her. In response, our aunt would pick up a shoe, beating her until her fury subsided. All this pressure was rooted in the fear that my sister might refuse the arranged marriage. She herself, desperate to escape this toxic household, prayed for a way out. Every prayer of mine also became a plea. "Oh Allah, please let my sister get married soon so she can be free from this torment." By Allah's will, her marriage finally took place, and we all breathed a sigh of relief. She accepted the husband chosen for her, and never even considered returning to her father's house. A year after my sister's marriage, my turn came. My match was arranged with my uncle's son. Though he wasn't ideal, he wasn't bad either, so I accepted it as my fate and tried to embrace the life that had been written for me. In the beginning, I often felt sad, but when I discovered I was expecting, I thanked Allah for bringing purpose to my life. My barren, desolate home finally became filled with hope. I became the mother of a beautiful son. One day, relatives came to visit my newborn. My husband had gone to the market to buy a cradle for the baby. I called him and asked him to bring sweets and snacks as well, but he said, "Why the hurry? Let me fit the cradle first, then I'll get everything." Patience, your aunt isn't going anywhere. However, my aunt overheard this and was so offended that she stormed out of the house, declaring, "I came to bless the baby and he insulted me instead. I don't need your sweets now." When my husband learned she had left, he bought sweets and went to my father's house to apologize. But my aunt refused to accept the sweets, berating him harshly instead. The next day, while my husband was at work, my aunt came and insisted I return to my father's house with her. I begged her to let me wait until my husband returned, but she ignored me and carried my baby to the car. Left with no choice, I went with her. I believed it was a temporary quarrel, but my aunt exaggerated the issue so much that it escalated to divorce. She told me, "If you love your house more than my honor, go back to your husband, but only after he grovels before us 70 times. But my husband wasn't one to bend beyond reason. Instead of yielding, he broke. He ended our marriage saying, "Keep your daughter with you. I have friends, money, and everything else I need. I'll move on, but you'll regret this." Perhaps others might regret it, but my aunt was satisfied. My home was ruined, and my son was deprived of his father's love. The cradle his father had lovingly brought never had the chance to cradle him. Perhaps she was destined to spend her life in the arms of sorrow. When my two younger sisters completed their matriculation, they got married. In truth, the storms that hit homes leave their marks behind. They too deemed it best to compromise with circumstances and accepted the life they were given. However, I ended up becoming the permanent maid for my aunt and her children in my father's house. It was because I believed I could raise my child through my own hard work rather than enduring humiliation in the outside world. My husband remarried and never looked back or inquired about me. However, he did make it clear that I could keep my son only as long as I did not remarry. If I remarried, he would take my son with him. My aunt provided us shelter, and as much as I would like to describe it in detail, suffice it to say that had it not been for my son, I would have left that house long ago. The thought of my son ending up with a stepmother kept me bound to my father's house. Our stepmother was well aware of our circumstances, and what she put us through was enough to teach us a lifetime of lessons. I endured every hardship, and though it felt like dying every day, I chose to live for the sake of my son. I kept hoping that one day my son would grow up, and my days would change for the better. The golden days of my youth were spent in cold and lonely nights that stripped me of everything. These nights scarred and wounded me, but I bore the weight of every moment. I endured the wounds of this harsh reality, thinking that if my child went astray or faced destruction, the regret would haunt me forever. I managed the household chores, faced the scorching heat and freezing cold, and took care of the kitchen. Finally, my hard work bore fruit. My son reached the final year of his engineering degree. When he completed his education, he called his father. His father, attempting to reconnect, sought to meet him. I did not stop my son from meeting him. When my son met his father, the latter helped him secure a job through one of his friends. It is true what they say. Patience bears sweet fruit. In the divine plan, there may be delays, but there is no darkness. God blessed me too. Today my son works at a multinational company. He has a good life, a house, and a car. I arranged his marriage, and now I live peacefully with my son, letting go of the old sorrows. I sacrificed my youth and my life for my son. Every night he calls me to his side and says, "Mother, if it weren't for you, I might not have been alive today." If you liked our story, please subscribe to the channel and don't forget to give a like.